In the darkness of a rainy night, an old pickup truck pulls up next to the wall of a remote shelter. A volunteer vet hops out, carrying a flashlight and a folder of test results. Inside the shed, a puppy barks non-stop, staring at a spot no one else can see. Without saying a word, the man approaches and starts examining the animal's body for signs. A silent cat, hiding among the cages, watches everything without making a sound. As the man turns the puppy on its side, he sees a mark in the fur and freezes. For a few seconds, he doesn't breathe, and there in the middle of the silence, something much greater begins to unfold. Love animal stories? Then subscribe now and don't miss a thing. Thanks for following along. Now, back to our story. The Miller family stood anxiously in the reception area of Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary, hope and fear battling across their faces as Dr. Ethan Parker carefully explained the situation. James Miller, a high school science teacher with kind eyes and a steady demeanor, kept his arm protectively around his wife, Rebecca, whose fingers nervously twisted the strap of her purse. Their daughter, 8-year-old Emma, clutched a worn, stuffed dog that bore a striking resemblance to the puppy they had lost. "You need to understand," Ethan explained gently, "that Charlie has experienced some kind of trauma. We don't know what happened during the time he was missing, but it's affected him deeply. He's not the same playful puppy you remember." "But it's definitely him?" Rebecca asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're absolutely certain?" Ethan nodded. "The crescent-shaped birthmark is identical, and his age and coloring match your description perfectly." "Can we see him?" James asked, squeezing his wife's shoulder. "Please?" "Of course," Ethan replied. "But I want to prepare you, especially Emma." He knelt down to the little girl's level. "Charlie might not recognize you right away. He might even seem scared of you. That doesn't mean he doesn't love you anymore. It just means he needs time to remember how safe he feels with you." Emma nodded solemnly, her brown eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. "Is Charlie sick, Dr. Parker?" "Not in his body," Ethan answered honestly. "But sometimes, when scary things happen, our minds can get sick too. Charlie's mind is trying to protect him from something scary that happened." "I want to help him get better," Emma declared, with the simple determination of childhood. Ethan smiled at her. "That's exactly what he needs." As he led the Miller family through the sanctuary, Sarah was preparing Charlie for the meeting. She had brought in a small bowl of the puppy's favorite treats and was sitting quietly beside his enclosure, not making any demands, simply being present. "You have visitors coming, little one," she murmured. "People who have been missing you terribly." The puppy watched her warily from his corner, his eyes tracking her every movement. In the 4 days since his arrival at the sanctuary, Sarah had been the only person he'd allowed to approach him, and even that tentative trust had been hard-won through hours of patient stillness and soft words. When the Millers appeared at the end of the corridor with Ethan, Sarah rose to her feet. The moment the family caught sight of Charlie, a collective gasp escaped them. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth, and tears sprang to her eyes. "Charlie," she whispered, her voice breaking. The puppy's ears pricked at the sound of his name, but he remained frozen in place, pressed against the back of his enclosure. "Can we go in?" James asked, his own voice thick with emotion. Ethan nodded, opening the gate carefully. "Move slowly. Speak softly. Let him come to you if he's ready." The family entered the enclosure together, kneeling on the floor, several feet away from the frightened puppy. Emma, showing wisdom beyond her years, set her stuffed toy on the ground between them and Charlie. "I brought Buddy," she said quietly. "Remember how you used to sleep with him, Charlie, when you were just a tiny puppy and got scared of thunderstorms?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Charlie remained rigid in his corner, his eyes darting between the three familiar faces. Then almost imperceptibly his nose twitched. The scent of home, of the people who had loved him from the beginning, reached him through the fog of fear. "We've missed you so much," Rebecca said, tears flowing freely now. "We've been looking everywhere for you." Slowly, with agonizing caution, Charlie lowered his head and took a small step forward, then another. He approached not the adults, but Emma's stuffed toy, sniffing it cautiously. A tiny whimper escaped him, not of fear, but of recognition. "That's it," James encouraged softly. "You remember Buddy, don't you, boy?" For the briefest moment, it seemed a breakthrough was imminent. Then, from somewhere outside the building, a car backfired with a loud bang. Charlie yelped in terror, scrambling back to his corner so quickly he seemed to blur, trembling violently, all progress erased in an instant. Emma's face crumpled. "He's really scared, Daddy." "No, sweetheart," James said, drawing his daughter close. "But we found him. That's what matters right now. We found our Charlie." The reunion, while not the joyous occasion everyone had hoped for, had confirmed what they all suspected. This was indeed the miller's beloved pet. But the road to recovery would clearly be long and difficult. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked. As they sat in Ethan's small office afterward, Emma quietly coloring a picture for Charlie at a side table. "That's up to you," Ethan replied honestly. "Charlie needs intensive care and patience. He's experiencing what we call post-traumatic stress. In humans, we'd recommend therapy. For dogs, it's a combination of safe routines, positive associations, and sometimes medication to help with the anxiety. We want to take him home," James said firmly. "He belongs with us." "I understand that," Ethan nodded. "But I'm concerned about the transition. The night terrors are severe. He wakes up screaming multiple times each night. It would be challenging for all of you, especially Emma." Rebecca looked torn, her maternal instincts pulling her in different directions, the desire to protect her daughter from distress competing with the need to help their beloved pet. "What if?" Sarah, who had been quietly observing, spoke up, hesitantly. "What if we try a gradual approach? The Millers could visit daily, spending longer periods with Charlie each time, but he stays here until he's more stable." Ethan considered this. "That could work. It would give us time to implement some therapeutic techniques while rebuilding his bond with you." "I actually had an idea about that," Sarah continued, turning to Emma. "You mentioned Charlie used to sleep with your stuffed dog when he was afraid of thunderstorms. Would you be willing to let Buddy stay here with Charlie for a while? Having something familiar that smells like home might help him feel safer at night." Emma nodded without hesitation. "Buddy can protect Charlie until he's not scared anymore." "There's something else we could try," Sarah added, recalling her earlier observation. "There's a cat here, Whiskers, who Charlie seemed curious about. Sometimes animals can reach each other in ways humans can't. Animal companionship might help him feel more secure." 2 days later, Sarah's theory was put to the test. Under careful supervision, Whiskers was brought into the quiet room adjacent to Charlie's enclosure. The orange tabby, rescued 3 months earlier from an abandoned property and now recovered from his own ordeal, had a distinctively crooked tail and a personality that the staff described as therapeutically chill. Charlie watched warily from his enclosure as Oliver, the sanctuary's most experienced handler, set Whiskers down on a cushion. Unlike most cats who would immediately explore a new space, Whiskers simply stretched, yawned, and settled comfortably on the cushion, seemingly unbothered by the nervous puppy observing him. "They'll need to get used to each other's presence before any direct interaction," Sarah explained to Rebecca, who had come for her daily visit. "But I've noticed that Charlie seems calmer when Whiskers is nearby." "I've never seen a cat that relaxed," Rebecca remarked, watching as Whiskers began grooming himself with casual indifference. "Whiskers has his own story," Sarah replied with a smile. "He was found abandoned and injured, but unlike many traumatized animals, he emerged from his recovery with this remarkable ability to just be. Most of our more anxious animals respond well to his presence." As the days passed, a routine developed. Each morning, Whiskers would be brought to the quiet room where Charlie could observe him through a transparent partition. The Millers would visit in the afternoon, spending time with Charlie while respecting his boundaries. Emma would read stories aloud, James would sit quietly working on lesson plans, and Rebecca would bring small items from home for Charlie to sniff and remember. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, changes began to occur. Charlie started sleeping with Emma's stuffed toy tucked against him. His night terrors, while still present, became less frequent. And most remarkably, he began showing interest in Whiskers, often watching the cat with an intensity that spoke of something beyond mere curiosity. One afternoon, while the Millers were visiting, Sarah made a decision. After consulting with Ethan, who was monitoring Charlie's progress closely, she carefully opened the partition between Charlie's space and the quiet room where Whiskers lounged. "We'll see if he's ready for a closer introduction," she explained to the family, who watched with bated breath. For several minutes, nothing happened. Charlie remained in his safe corner, Emma's stuffed toy between his paws. Then Whiskers, with the impeccable timing that only cats seem to possess, stood up, stretched, and casually sauntered through the opening into Charlie's space. The room froze. Everyone held their breath as the cat approached the traumatized puppy. Charlie tensed, his eyes wide, but he didn't retreat. When Whiskers was about a foot away, he did something unexpected. He flopped onto his side, exposing his belly in what cat behaviorists recognize as an extraordinary display of trust. "I don't believe it," Ethan whispered from the doorway where he had been observing. "I've never seen Whiskers do that with another animal." What happened next would become the first chapter in Charlie's road to recovery, a moment that Sarah would later describe as the beginning of his journey back to himself. Slowly, hesitantly, Charlie lowered his head and sniffed at Whiskers. Extended paw. The cat remained perfectly still, allowing the inspection. Then, in a gesture so gentle it brought tears to Rebecca's eyes, Charlie lay down beside Whiskers, close enough to feel the cat's warmth, but not quite touching. Two broken creatures finding comfort in each other's presence. It wasn't a miracle cure. Charlie's trauma ran too deep for instant healing, but it was something equally precious, a first step toward trust, toward connection, toward the possibility that the darkness that haunted his nights might not be permanent after all. The tentative bond between Charlie and Whiskers grew stronger with each passing day. What had begun as cautious tolerance transformed into something resembling friendship. The sanctuary staff watched in amazement as the traumatized puppy, who had once flinched at the slightest movement, began to mirror the cat's relaxed demeanor. When Whiskers stretched out in a patch of sunlight streaming through the window, Charlie would eventually settle nearby. When the cat groomed himself with unhurried precision, the puppy would watch intently, sometimes even allowing himself to doze off in the presence of his feline companion. "It's remarkable," Ethan observed to Sarah one evening as they reviewed Charlie's progress notes. "His night terrors are down by almost 40%. Sarah nodded, sipping her lukewarm coffee. The sanctuary was quiet at this hour, most of the animals settled for the night, the volunteers gone home. Only she and Ethan remained, along with Oliver, who handled the overnight shift. "The Millers' visits are helping too," she said. "Emma especially. Children have this incredible ability to communicate without judgment or expectation." "I've been thinking," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. Charlie's responding well to the current approach, but I wonder if we could accelerate his healing process with something additional. What did you have in mind? Music therapy. Ethan smiled at Sarah's surprised expression. I know it sounds unconventional, but there's growing research supporting its effectiveness with traumatized animals. Certain frequencies and rhythms can actually help regulate their nervous systems. Sarah considered this. I have a background in music, actually. Played cello all through college. Perfect. Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Would you be willing to try it with Charlie? Nothing elaborate, just simple, soothing melodies during his most vulnerable times. Like evenings, before the night terrors typically start? Exactly. We could create a positive association with nighttime, potentially disrupting the fear cycle. The following evening, Sarah brought her cello to the sanctuary. It had been years since she'd played regularly, but her fingers remembered the strings, the weight of the bow, the exact pressure needed to produce the warm, resonant tones that had once been such an integral part of her life. She set up in the quiet room adjacent to Charlie's space, where the puppy lay curled beside an already dozing Whiskers. The Millers had left an hour earlier, with Emma reluctantly saying goodbye to Charlie after their longest visit yet. The little girl had been ecstatic to see Charlie take a treat directly from her hand for the first time, a breakthrough that had left everyone misty-eyed. I'm not sure if you're a classical music fan, Sarah said softly to Charlie as she tuned her instrument, but we'll find out soon enough. She began with Bach, the simple mathematical precision of his cello suites, creating patterns of sound that flowed like water. Charlie's ears twitched at the first notes, his head lifting slightly. Whiskers, remarkably, didn't stir, as if the music had merely deepened his feline contentment. For 30 minutes, Sarah played, losing herself in the familiar movements, the muscle memory of notes and phrases she had once practiced for hours each day. When she finally rested her bow, the atmosphere in the room had subtly shifted. Charlie was still awake, watching her with an expression that seemed almost curious, his body noticeably more relaxed than when she'd begun. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked him with a smile. The nightly music sessions became a new fixture in Charlie's routine. Sarah would arrive after the Miller's visit, set up her cello, and play for half an hour. Sometimes Ethan would join them, sitting quietly in the corner, observing with his keen veterinarian's eye the subtle changes in Charlie's demeanor. Other times, Oliver would listen from the doorway, his usual stoicism softening as the music filled the space. After a week of these sessions, Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. She had been experimenting with different composers, trying to determine which styles elicited the most positive response from Charlie. Bach seemed to calm him. Debussy made him curious, but it was during an impromptu rendition of a simple folk melody that she noticed something extraordinary. Charlie had fallen asleep. Not the restless, vigilant dozing he normally allowed himself, but deep, peaceful sleep, his side rising and falling in slow, even breaths, his paws occasionally twitching with what could only be described as normal doggy dreams. "It's working," she whispered to Oliver, who had witnessed the moment. That night, for the first time since his arrival at the sanctuary, Charlie slept through until morning without a single terror waking him. The breakthrough energized everyone involved in Charlie's care. The Millers, who had been faithfully visiting every day, despite the emotional toll of seeing their beloved pet still struggling, were overjoyed at the news. "We've been thinking," James said during their visit the following afternoon. "If music is helping Charlie, maybe we could contribute something too." Rebecca nodded, pulling a small device from her purse. "It's a voice recorder. We thought we could record our voices, reading stories, talking about our day, singing Emma's bedtime songs. Something familiar he could listen to when we're not here." "That's brilliant," Sarah exclaimed. "Familiar voices combined with the music might create an even stronger sense of safety for him." Emma, who had been quietly brushing Whiskers with a small cat brush, the cat tolerating this attention with his usual dignified forbearance, looked up excitedly. "Can I sing my special goodnight song for Charlie, the one I made up for him when he was a baby puppy?" "That would be perfect, sweetheart," Rebecca smiled. They recorded several tracks, James reading a chapter from the family's current bedtime story, Rebecca humming a lullaby she used to sing to Emma as a baby, and finally, Emma's special goodnight song. The little girl's voice, sweet and slightly off-key, filled the room with innocent love as she sang about stars and dreams and puppies who are brave. That evening, Sarah combined her cello playing with the recordings, creating a soundtrack of healing that surrounded Charlie with the sounds of music and family. The effect was immediate and profound. Not only did Charlie sleep through the night again, but the sanctuary staff noticed a new development the following morning. The puppy had moved his sleeping spot from the back corner of his enclosure to a spot directly beside the speaker where Emma's voice had played. As the weeks passed, Charlie's improvement accelerated. The combination of Whiskers' calming presence, the Miller family's daily visits, and the evening music therapy created a cocoon of safety that allowed his traumatized psyche to begin healing. He started showing more classic puppy behaviors. Brief moments of playfulness with toys, curiosity about his surroundings, even the occasional tail wag when Emma arrived. "He's ready for the next step," Ethan announced during their weekly progress meeting. "I think it's time for Charlie to spend a day at the Miller's home." The suggestion was met with both excitement and apprehension. Would the change of environment trigger a setback? Would Charlie associate their home with whatever trauma had occurred during his disappearance? "We'll prepare everything carefully," Sarah assured the family. "We'll bring Whiskers along for moral support, and I'll come with my cello for the evening session. We'll make it as familiar and non-threatening as possible." The day of Charlie's first home visit arrived with the gentle warmth of early autumn. The Millers had spent the previous evening preparing their house, setting up a quiet space in the living room with bedding that carried the sense of both the sanctuary and their home, removing anything that might startle or overwhelm a sensitive animal, and even practicing speaking in the soft, measured tones that had become their habit during visits to the sanctuary. Sarah arrived with Charlie and Whiskers in the sanctuary's van, her cello carefully stowed in the back. As she pulled into the Miller's driveway, she could see Emma watching from the window, practically bouncing with excitement. The moment was laden with possibility and risk, a crucial test of Charlie's progress. "Ready for a field trip?" Sarah asked the animals in the carrier beside her. Whiskers yawned indifferently, while Charlie peered out with wary attention. Rebecca and James met them at the door, their faces a mixture of hope and nervousness. "Everything's ready," Rebecca said. "We followed all your suggestions." "Perfect," Sarah nodded, lifting the carrier. "Let's take this very slowly." They set up in the living room, which the Millers had transformed into a sanctuary-like space. Charlie was allowed to emerge from the carrier at his own pace, with Whiskers predictably taking the lead, sauntering out to inspect his new surroundings with casual interest. Charlie followed hesitantly, staying close to his feline friend. "Look, Charlie," Emma said gently from where she sat cross-legged on the floor. "I put Buddy on your bed, and here's your special blanket from the sanctuary." The familiar objects seemed to reassure the puppy. He approached the bed, sniffing cautiously, then looked back at Sarah as if seeking confirmation that this new situation was safe. "It's okay," she encouraged. "This is your family's home. You lived here before." As the day progressed, Charlie gradually explored more of the house, always with either Whiskers or a human companion nearby. When they ventured into the backyard, the place from which he had disappeared months ago, Everyone held their breath, watching for signs of distress or fear. But Charlie simply sniffed the grass, investigated a flower bed, and then settled in a patch of sunshine, showing no obvious reaction to the location. "Do you think he remembers what happened?" Rebecca whispered to Sarah as they watched from the patio. "It's hard to say," Sarah replied honestly. "Animals process trauma differently than humans. The specific memories might be fragmented, but the emotional imprint remains." The true test came as evening approached. Would the nighttime darkness trigger Charlie's terrors, even in this environment of love and security? The family gathered in the living room as Sarah prepared her cello. Whiskers, having thoroughly examined the house and apparently found it acceptable, had claimed a spot on the windowsill where the last rays of sunset bathed him in golden light. Emma carefully placed the voice recorder near Charlie's bed and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, singing the goodnight song that had become part of Charlie's healing ritual. As the sweet, childish melody played, Sarah joined in with her cello, the rich tones weaving around Emma's recorded voice. Charlie, who had been lying near Whiskers, lifted his head at the familiar sounds. For a moment, he seemed confused by hearing the music in this new location. Then, in a moment that Rebecca would later describe as the miracle we'd been praying for, Charlie rose from his spot, walked deliberately across the room, and settled on the bed next to Emma, resting, his head on her lap. The little girl froze, tears springing to her eyes. It was the first time since his return that Charlie had initiated physical contact with any of them. Carefully, moving with exquisite slowness, Emma placed her small hand on Charlie's head. The puppy didn't pull away. Instead, he closed his eyes, releasing a deep sigh that seemed to carry the weight of months of fear and separation. "He remembers," James whispered, his own eyes glistening. "He really remembers." As Sarah continued playing, the sunset faded into twilight, and twilight into the gentle darkness of evening. The family remained in their tableau of reunion, Emma stroking Charlie's fur, Rebecca and James watching with quiet joy, and Whiskers observing from his perch with feline inscrutability. In this moment of connection, the first genuine healing seemed possible. The road ahead would still have challenges, but something fundamental had shifted. Yet even as hope blossomed in the warm living room of the Miller home, questions lingered in the shadows. What had happened during those lost weeks of Charlie's disappearance? What trauma had left such deep scars on his psyche? And most importantly, could he ever truly recover from an ordeal that remained, for all of them, an unsolved mystery? The success of Charlie's first visit home marked a turning point in his recovery. Over the next few weeks, the day visits became overnight stays, gradually extending until Charlie was spending 3 days at a time with the Miller family before returning to the sanctuary for what Ethan called reinforcement sessions time, with Whiskers and the structured environment that had first helped him feel safe. October painted Vermont's landscape in brilliant hues of red and gold, the crisp air carrying the scent of apples and wood smoke. At Whispering Pines, the staff was preparing for their annual Fall Festival, a community fundraiser that brought visitors from throughout Maplewood and beyond to support the sanctuary's work. "Are you sure it's a good idea for Charlie to be there?" Rebecca asked during a consultation with Ethan and Sarah. "There will be so many people, so much noise." Ethan considered this carefully. "I think controlled exposure could actually be beneficial at this stage. We'll set up a quiet area where he can retreat if it becomes overwhelming, but allowing him to experience new situations while knowing you and his support system are nearby. That's how we build resilience." "And Whiskers will be there too," Sarah added with a smile. Our little feline therapist hasn't steered us wrong yet. The day of the festival arrived with perfect autumn weather. Sunshine warming the sanctuary grounds while a gentle breeze kept the temperature comfortable. Colorful tents dotted the property, offering everything from face painting and pumpkin decorating for children to educational displays about animal welfare for adults. A small stage featured local musicians playing acoustic sets, and the scent of cinnamon and sugar wafted from a food truck selling apple cider donuts. The Millers arrived early, bringing Charlie on his leash, a milestone in itself, as he had only recently become comfortable with this most basic of dog accessories. Emma walked proudly beside her puppy, carefully monitoring his reactions to the festival preparations. We'll set up here. Sarah showed them to a quiet corner behind the main building. A small tent had been erected with comfortable cushions, Charlie's familiar bedding, and a water bowl. This is Charlie's safe zone. Anytime he seems overwhelmed, bring him back here to decompress. As the festival got underway and visitors began arriving, Charlie stayed close to Emma and Rebecca, while James volunteered at the information booth, sharing their family's story with anyone who expressed interest in adoption. To everyone's surprise and delight, Charlie handled the activity remarkably well, accepting gentle pats from children under Emma's careful supervision and even taking treats from Sarah's hand when she checked in on them throughout the morning. He's doing so well, Rebecca marveled, watching as Charlie sniffed curiously at a pumpkin Emma was painting. A month ago, I couldn't have imagined this. He's got a great support system, Sarah replied, and he's inherently a good, sweet dog. The trauma didn't change who he is at his core, it just buried it for a while. By midday, Charlie was showing signs of fatigue from the constant stimulation, and Rebecca wisely took him to the quiet tent for a break. Emma stayed with the pumpkin painting, promising to join them soon. As Charlie settled on his familiar bedding, Whiskers, who had been supervising the festival from various elevated perches throughout the morning, appeared as if summoned and curled up beside the tired puppy. You two have an almost supernatural connection, Rebecca laughed softly, watching as Charlie immediately relaxed in the cat's presence. From outside the tent came the sounds of the festival in full swing: music, laughter, the happy barking of dogs enjoying the pet-friendly event. Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel genuine hope for the first time since Charlie's return. Perhaps they were finally approaching the end of this difficult journey. Her peaceful moment was interrupted by Sarah's voice, uncharacteristically urgent. "Rebecca, are you in there? I need to speak with you." Rebecca emerged from the tent to find Sarah looking unusually serious, with Emma beside her, clutching her freshly painted pumpkin and looking confused. "What's wrong?" Rebecca asked, immediately concerned. "There's someone here you need to meet," Sarah said, her voice low. "A man just arrived. He says he found Charlie on the side of the road the day before Thomas Wilson brought him to us." Rebecca's heart began to race. What? Why is he only coming forward now?" "He's from out of state," Sarah explained, leading them toward the sanctuary's main building. "He's here visiting family and saw our festival banner with Charlie's picture on it. He recognized him immediately." In Ethan's office, a man in his early 60s with weathered features and kind eyes stood as they entered. He introduced himself as Frank Harrison, a long-haul truck driver from Ohio. "I didn't know the pup had a family looking for him," he began apologetically. "If I'd known, I would have done things differently." "Please, tell us what happened," Rebecca said, instinctively pulling Emma closer to her side. Frank settled back in his chair, his expression troubled. "I was making a delivery run through Vermont, took a back road to avoid some construction. That's when I saw him, just lying there on the roadside, soaking wet and shivering. It was pouring rain that day." Charlie's afraid of thunderstorms, Emma piped up. He always has been. Frank nodded gravely. There was a big one that day, lightning, thunder, the works. Anyway, I couldn't just leave him there, so I picked him up, wrapped him in my jacket. He was terrified but didn't seem hurt. I figured he'd wandered off from a nearby farm or something. Where did you find him exactly? Ethan asked, leaning forward intently. About 15 miles north of here, near an old abandoned property. Hartwick Farm, I think the mailbox said. Sarah and Ethan exchanged significant glances. Hartwick's place has been empty for years, Sarah said, ever since the old man moved to Florida. I would have taken the pup to a shelter right away, Frank continued, but I had a deadline to meet, so I brought him to a friend's place here in Maplewood, Thomas Wilson. Asked him to take care of getting the dog where he needed to go. I was back on the road the same day. Rebecca's mind was racing. But Charlie disappeared from our backyard in Burlington. That's almost an hour's drive from here. How did he end up 15 miles north of Maplewood? Frank shook his head. I wish I could tell you, ma'am. All I know is he was in bad shape when I found him. Not injured, but terrified like I've never seen. Shaking so hard I thought he might be having some kind of seizure. As the adults continued talking, Emma slipped away unnoticed, returning to the quiet tent where Charlie and Whiskers were resting. The festival sounds seemed distant now as she sat cross-legged beside her puppy, stroking his fur thoughtfully. I wish you could tell us what happened to you, she whispered. Back in Ethan's office, the conversation had taken a technical turn. The timing fits with when Charlie went missing, Ethan was saying, but that still leaves a gap of nearly 3 weeks unaccounted for. Could he have been wandering all that time? Rebecca asked, the thought of her puppy alone and afraid for weeks making her heart ache. It's possible, Ethan replied, but unlikely he would have survived that long on his own, especially with his fear of storms. And his physical condition, when he arrived, wasn't consistent with 3 weeks of exposure and malnourishment. A knock at the door interrupted them. Maggie, the sanctuary's senior caretaker, entered with an apologetic smile. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone else here asking about Charlie. A woman named Patricia Lawrence says she might have information. The situation was becoming increasingly surreal. Rebecca followed Ethan and Sarah back to the reception area, where a well-dressed woman in her 50s waited anxiously. Upon seeing Rebecca, she stepped forward with an expression of profound regret. Mrs. Miller, I'm Patricia Lawrence. I believe I may have temporarily had your dog. The revelation that followed pieced together more of Charlie's missing weeks. Patricia explained that her grandson, 11-year-old Tyler, had found Charlie wandering near their vacation cabin about 20 miles from Burlington, just days after he'd gone missing from the Miller's yard. Tyler has been begging for a dog for years, but my son's allergic, Patricia explained, her voice tight with emotion. When he found this puppy with no collar, he hid him in our shed. I had no idea until I heard him whimpering one night during a thunderstorm. You kept him? Rebecca asked, struggling to keep accusation from her voice. Only for a few days, Patricia insisted. I knew it was wrong, but Tyler was so attached. Already, I convinced myself that the puppy must have been abandoned since there was no identification, but he was clearly a well-cared-for pet, and the guilt was eating at me. She took a deep breath before continuing. I was going to take him to a shelter, but then he got away from us. There was a terrible storm, and the shed door wasn't properly latched. He bolted. We searched for hours but couldn't find him. Tyler was devastated. That would explain how he ended up near Hartwick Farm, Ethan mused. It's roughly between Patricia's cabin and Maplewood. Rebecca struggled to process this information. Part of her wanted to be angry at this woman who had kept their beloved pet, prolonging their agony of not knowing what had happened to him. But the genuine remorse in Patricia's eyes was unmistakable. I saw your missing posters afterward, Patricia continued, her voice breaking. I was too ashamed to come forward, but then I saw the festival announcement with his picture. She turned to Rebecca with tears in her eyes. I'm so deeply sorry for what my family put you through. The festival continued outside, oblivious to the drama unfolding within the sanctuary walls. As Rebecca, Ethan, and Sarah pieced together Charlie's journey, with the help of Frank and Patricia, the mystery of his missing weeks began to take shape. From his escape from the miller's backyard, to his discovery by young Tyler, to his second escape during a storm, to being found by Frank on the roadside and finally brought to the sanctuary by Thomas. Each chapter filled with fear and confusion for a puppy who only wanted to be home. But one piece of the puzzle remained elusive. What specifically had traumatized Charlie so deeply? The night terrors, the extreme fear responses. They seemed disproportionate even to the stress of being lost and handling multiple transitions. There must be something else, Ethan said thoughtfully. Something that happened during one of these transitions that caused such profound trauma. As if on cue, Emma burst into the room, her face alight with excitement. Mom, Dr. Parker, I think I know what scared Charlie so badly. All eyes turned to the little girl, who clutched her painted pumpkin in one hand and her phone in the other. I was showing Charlie pictures of our house to help him remember. And when I got to the ones from July 4th, he started trembling and hiding behind whiskers. Ethan knelt to Emma's level. May I see those pictures, Emma? She handed him her phone, open to photos from the Miller's Independence Day barbecue. The images showed their backyard decorated with flags and streamers, the family smiling around a grill, and as Ethan swiped further, bright fireworks illuminating the night sky above their neighborhood. Fireworks, he said softly, the realization dawning. Of course. But Charlie's been afraid of thunderstorms since he was tiny, Rebecca objected. That's nothing new. True, Ethan nodded, but think about it. He disappears during summer. He's already afraid of loud noises. Then he experiences not just regular storms, but possibly multiple fireworks displays throughout July. The sound trauma would have been compounded with each exposure, especially combined with the stress of being lost and handled by strangers. Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. And the night terrors began when he heard car backfires or other loud, sudden noises. The trauma trigger isn't about the people or places, it's about the sounds. A picture was emerging now. A puppy with a pre-existing fear of loud noises, subjected to the terror of summer storms and fireworks, while already disoriented and separated from his family. Each thunderclap, each firework explosion would have reinforced and deepened his trauma, creating the severe anxiety response they had been battling for weeks. That's why the music therapy worked so well, Sarah realized. We were giving him positive sound associations to counter the negative ones. As the pieces fell into place, Rebecca felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at finally understanding, lingering anger at the circumstances, but most of all, an overwhelming gratitude that Charlie had found his way back to them despite everything. Outside the sanctuary building, the festival continued in full swing. Families laughed, children played, and adoptable animals won hearts with their hopeful expressions. And in a quiet tent behind it all, a golden retriever puppy slept peacefully beside an orange tabby cat with a crooked tail, both blissfully unaware that the final piece of their shared story had just been discovered. The weeks following the fall festival brought dramatic changes to Charlie's recovery. Armed with the knowledge of his specific trauma trigger, Ethan developed a comprehensive desensitization program designed to help the puppy overcome his fear of loud, sudden noises. The process was meticulous and required extraordinary patience from everyone involved. It's like rebuilding a foundation brick by brick, Ethan explained to the Millers during a therapy session at their home. We start with recordings of the triggering sounds at such a low volume they're barely perceptible, and we pair them with positive experiences, treats, play, affection. Emma took her role in Charlie's recovery with the serious dedication only a child can muster. Each afternoon after school, she would sit with Charlie in their living room, the voice recorder playing the softest whisper of recorded thunderstorms while she read to him from her favorite books. James and Rebecca would join them, creating a family cocoon of safety around the puppy as he gradually learned that these sounds didn't have to signal danger. The volume increases so gradually that he barely notices, Sarah observed during one of her weekly visits. It's working. Look at how his ears aren't flattening anymore when he hears the rumble. Charlie's progress accelerated when they discovered, quite by accident, that he responded exceptionally well to classical piano music. During his desensitization sessions, Rebecca, who taught piano at the local community center, had been practicing one evening when a particularly loud recording of fireworks played during Charlie's therapy. To everyone's surprise, instead of panicking, Charlie had stayed calm, seemingly focusing on the piano notes rather than the triggering sounds. It's like the music gives him something else to anchor to, Rebecca realized, immediately incorporating piano playing into his daily therapy. By Thanksgiving, Charlie was spending most of his time at the Miller home, returning to the sanctuary only for specialized therapy sessions and, importantly, visits with Whiskers. The bond between the puppy and the cat had proven too significant to sever completely, and after much discussion, a new arrangement was reached. "We'd like to adopt Whiskers," James announced one crisp November afternoon, standing in Ethan's office with his family beside him. "If that's possible. Charlie needs him, and honestly, I think we all do." Sarah, who had grown deeply attached to both animals, felt a bittersweet pang at the idea of Whiskers leaving the sanctuary. But she couldn't deny the therapeutic relationship between the two, nor the genuine love the Miller family had developed for the unflappable orange tabby. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said, her voice only slightly thick with emotion. "Whiskers deserves a forever home, too." The day they brought Whiskers home permanently was one of quiet celebration. Emma had prepared a special bed for the cat beside Charlie's in her room, decorating it with soft blankets and toys selected with careful consideration for feline preferences. Whiskers, true to his imperturbable nature, inspected the house thoroughly before claiming Rebecca's piano bench as his preferred perch, much to everyone's amusement. "Some things never change," Sarah laughed when she visited the following weekend. "He always did have a taste for the finer things." As winter draped Vermont in pristine white, the most significant test of Charlie's recovery loomed on the horizon. New Year's Eve, with its inevitable fireworks and celebrations. The family had decided to stay home rather than attend the town's festivities, creating a quiet, controlled environment for Charlie's first major exposure to fireworks since his trauma had been identified. "We've prepared everything exactly as we discussed," Rebecca told Ethan and Sarah, who had both come to support them through the evening. "Piano ready, safe space set up in the basement where the sound is muffled, all his comfort items in place. And I made Charlie special earmuffs," Emma added proudly, displaying a custom-fitted headset designed to reduce noise while remaining comfortable for the puppy to wear. "You've all done an amazing job," Ethan said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Whatever happens tonight, remember how far he's come. 6 months ago, we couldn't have imagined him being this functional, this connected to his family." As evening fell and the first distant pops of early celebratory fireworks began, Charlie showed signs of anxiety, pacing, whining softly, seeking out Whiskers, who had predictably positioned himself in the most comfortable spot on the living room sofa. But the extreme terror, the uncontrollable shaking and desperate cries that had once characterized his response to loud noises, were notably absent. Rebecca began playing piano, the gentle melodies of Debussy filling the house with calming notes that seemed to float above the occasional bang and pop from outside. James sat on the floor near Charlie, not forcing interaction but making himself available if the puppy sought comfort. Emma, with wisdom beyond her years, had set up a relaxation fort under the dining room table, lined with pillows and blankets, where Charlie could retreat if he needed to feel more secure. When the clock approached midnight and the intensity of fireworks increased, Charlie did seek shelter in Emma's fort, but instead of cowering alone in terror, he allowed the little girl to join him, her small arm draped protectively over his back as she whispered encouragement. Most remarkably, Whiskers, abandoning his comfortable perch, squeezed into the fort as well, pressing his warm body against Charlie's side in silent solidarity. From her position at the piano, Rebecca could see into the fort, where her daughter and the two animals had created their own bubble of safety amidst the chaos outside. Tears sprang to her eyes as she continued playing, the music weaving a soundtrack of healing around them all. "Look," she whispered to James, who joined her on the piano bench, "they're going to be okay." In that moment, watching their daughter comfort the puppy who had endured so much, seeing the extraordinary bond between Charlie and his unlikely feline protector, they both knew it was true. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would likely be challenges ahead. But the foundation of trust and love they had rebuilt was strong enough to weather whatever came. By February, Charlie's transformation had progressed to the point where Ethan deemed him ready for the final phase of his therapy, a graduation of sorts that involved controlled exposure to other dogs. The sanctuary organized small play groups, carefully selecting calm, well-socialized dogs who wouldn't overwhelm Charlie as he relearned canine social skills. "He's naturally social," Sarah observed during one such session, watching as Charlie cautiously engaged with a gentle Labrador named Daisy. That part of his personality is re-emerging now that the trauma response is less dominant. The Millers attended these sessions faithfully, delighting in each small victory as Charlie gradually reclaimed the playful, affectionate nature that had been buried beneath layers of fear. Emma, in particular, bloomed alongside her puppy. Her initial heartbreak at his condition transformed into a deep, mature compassion that impressed all the adults in her life. "She wants to be a veterinarian now," Rebecca told Sarah during one of their increasingly social visits. What had begun as a professional relationship focused on Charlie's recovery had evolved into a genuine friendship between the two women. Specifically, she wants to work with traumatized animals. She talks about it constantly. "She'd be wonderful at it," Sarah replied, watching as Emma patiently encouraged Charlie to approach a new dog in the playgroup. "She has a natural gift." Spring arrived in Vermont with its promise of renewal, painting the landscape with delicate greens and the soft pinks and whites of early blossoms. At Whispering Pines, preparations were underway for the annual spring celebration, an event that marked new beginnings and highlighted success stories from the previous year. "We'd like Charlie to be this year's honorary ambassador," Ethan proposed. During a meeting with the Millers, his journey represents everything our sanctuary stands for: hope, healing, and the incredible resilience of animals when given proper support. The day of the celebration dawned clear and mild. The sanctuary, grounds decorated with pastel streamers and bouquets of locally grown flowers. Volunteers guided visitors through various educational displays, while successfully adopted animals and their families gathered to share their stories. Charlie, wearing a special bandana designating him as the event's ambassador, greeted visitors with newfound confidence, accepting pats and attention with a wagging tail. Emma remained close by, proudly explaining to anyone who would listen the techniques they had used to help her puppy overcome his trauma. The most important thing, she informed a group of captivated children, is patience and understanding. And sometimes you need a good friend to help you through the scary parts. At this, she glanced affectionately at Whiskers, who had deigned to attend the event and was currently surveying the proceedings from a comfortable perch on a nearby bench. As the celebration continued, Sarah found herself standing slightly apart, watching the scene with a full heart. The transformation wasn't just in Charlie, it was in all of them. The Millers had grown stronger as a family through their shared purpose of healing their beloved pet. Ethan had expanded his therapeutic approaches, incorporating the music therapy techniques that had proven so successful with Charlie into his work with other traumatized animals. And Sarah herself had rediscovered her passion for music, now teaching a cello to students at the same community center where Rebecca taught piano. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ethan asked, joining her on the sidelines. Sarah smiled, nodding toward Charlie, who was now playing a gentle game of tug-of-war with another dog while Emma supervised. "I was just thinking about connections, how Charlie and Whiskers formed this unlikely bond that helped heal them both, how the Millers never gave up even when progress seemed impossible, how all of us came together around this one small puppy." Healing is rarely a solo journey, Ethan agreed, his gaze softening as he watched Charlie. Sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply not being alone in your pain. The afternoon sun cast long golden light across the sanctuary grounds as the celebration reached its culminating moment. A special recognition ceremony for the animals and humans who had demonstrated extraordinary courage and compassion throughout the year. Ethan stood on a small stage, addressing the gathered crowd. "Each year we present the Whispering Pines Heart of Courage Award to an animal who has shown exceptional bravery and resilience. This year, the choice was unanimous among our staff and volunteers." At the edge of the crowd, Charlie sat between Emma and Rebecca, Whiskers uncharacteristically tolerating the busy environment from his position in James's arms. None of them expected what came next. This year's Heart of Courage Award goes not to a single animal, but to a partnership that demonstrates the extraordinary healing power of connection. Charlie and Whiskers, would you and your family please join me on stage? A ripple of applause turned into a standing ovation as the Millers made their way forward, Charlie walking confidently on his leash while James carefully carried Whiskers. As they climbed the steps to the stage, Sarah felt tears springing to her eyes. The journey from that first night, when Charlie's heart-wrenching cries had echoed through the sanctuary, to this moment of triumph seemed almost miraculous. "Many of you know Charlie's story," Ethan continued, kneeling to ruffle the puppy's ears affectionately. "How he came to us traumatized and terrified, unable to sleep through the night without being gripped by terror. What you might not know is the role this extraordinary cat played in his recovery." Whiskers, as if aware he was being discussed, stretched regally in James's arms, causing a ripple of laughter through the crowd. When traditional approaches weren't enough, Whiskers somehow knew exactly what Charlie needed: steady, unconditional companionship from someone who understood trauma but had found their way through it. Together, they showed us that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds, that connection can bridge the gaps that words cannot reach. Emma stepped forward, her clear voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Charlie and Whiskers taught me that sometimes being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared but trying anyway, especially when someone you love is beside you." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed into the late afternoon sunshine, Sarah found herself standing once more with the Millers, watching as Charlie playfully chased a butterfly across a patch of grass, his movements free and unencumbered. by the fear that had once controlled him. "I remember the night he first arrived," she said softly. "How his cries seemed to contain all the sorrow in the world. I never imagined we'd be here, watching him play without a care." Rebecca squeezed her hand. "You gave us back our Charlie. We can never thank you enough for that." "He did the hard work," Sarah replied, her gaze shifting to include Whiskers, who was supervising Charlie's antics with typical feline reserve. "They both did. We just created the conditions that made healing possible." As the sun began to set over Whispering Pines Animal Sanctuary, casting long shadows across the grounds, a small gathering remained. The Millers, Sarah, Ethan, and a few of the staff members who had been most involved in Charlie's care. They sat in comfortable silence on the sanctuary's wraparound porch, watching as Emma played a gentle game of fetch with Charlie on the lawn. "It's moments like these that make all the difficult days worthwhile," Ethan observed, his voice soft with emotion. "Seeing them together, knowing what they've overcome." Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The journey had changed all of them in ways they couldn't have anticipated when a traumatized puppy first arrived at their door. It had taught them about resilience, about the healing power of connection, about finding light even in the darkest places. As if sensing her thoughts, Charlie paused in his play, turning to look back at the gathered humans who had formed his circle of protection and healing. In his eyes was a clarity and peace that had once seemed impossible, the shadow of trauma not erased, perhaps, but no longer defining him. In that moment, as the last golden rays of sunlight illuminated the scene, the final pieces of a long and difficult journey fell into place. It wasn't just Charlie who had been found and returned home. It was all of them, discovering in their shared purpose a deeper understanding of what it meant to heal, to hope, and to begin again. When the emotion of discovery finally overwhelmed them, no one could hold back their tears. The puppy, now surrounded by a family who loved him unconditionally, had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of love to light even the darkest hours. The sanctuary, once merely a structure to house animals in need, had transformed into a place where new stories could be written, where other animals might find their second chances, and where every cry of despair could eventually transform into a bark of joy. In the end, Charlie's journey had not only changed his life, but had illuminated the path for all those around him, reminding everyone of the importance of compassion in a world that sometimes seemed overwhelming. As twilight settled over Whispering Pines, bringing with it the promise of stars and the gentle rhythm of night, there was a sense of completion, of wholeness restored, not to how things were before, but to something new and equally precious. Dear listeners, we hope that Charlie and Whiskers' story has touched your heart as deeply as it has touched ours. For more emotional journeys like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the healing power of connection. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have so many more tales of resilience and hope to share. We're waiting to hear your thoughts in the comments section below.